focus on just those elements that need to go in the very first page of a feature film or TV pilot script. So we're going to be looking at things like setting the tone, drawing the reader into the world, establishing a character, starting to figure out what is the objective of that character, and just starting to immerse us in this world that you've created and help us start to attach to a character that we will follow on a journey. So let's get started with our first few slides here. Thank you for being with us. If you are on Discord, you can interact with the class, and if you're watching on YouTube or Twitch or a different place like that, you can leave your comments in those chats. Sometimes takes me a second to see them, so it's easiest if you just join us on Discord, which you can do at scriptcamp.net. You can get the link to join our server totally for free for this promotional class. Make sure to keep your microphones muted while we're in the class, so you can find that small gray microphone icon in the bottom left corner of your screen. Just make sure that's on for the most part. There will be times in the class where we can call on you to speak out loud and to explain your ideas and things like that, so be prepared to do that. What is Script Camp? We are a screenwriting community that's focused on taking you from idea to completed draft. We have lots of classes, events, and workshops, many for free, like this one here, and some are for our supporting members, like the boot camps, Writers Lab, and Advanced Labs. This is me. I'm a pro screenwriter who has been signed since 2017. I have written on Creepshow 2019 for the Shudder Network, have been featured in sections of the Spec Book, Tracking Board's Best Writers of the Year booklet, other things like that you can see on this list, and I have been teaching the boot camps and weekly Writers Lab since Script Camp started. We are part of Skill Camp, which is a nonprofit organization that features many servers like this, free and low-cost classes to help you learn skills and reach your life goals. We've recently added things like film, creator, cartoon, word camp, design, and lingo, all based on or focusing on different skills, and Code Camp, starting classes in the new year. You can donate, become a supporting member, and get access to all our classes and labs, not just these free promotional ones, but the longer series too. The longest series of which is our 12-week novel writing course on WordCamp, where we go from blank page to complete first draft of a novel in 12 weeks. That is wrapping up our first course of that pretty soon. We also have boot camps going on in Toon Camp, so animation classes, and Code Camp will be starting, I mentioned, once a week in the first week of January. So Lingo Camp, still a pretty small one, but I'd love to get more teachers on there. So if you want to volunteer to teach a language that you know, send me or Nacho a message, or if you have any other kind of skills that you think that you might want to teach in a class.
You can even teach English.
Sure, absolutely. So, and last, you can tell your friends, refer somebody, and you'll both get a free month of unlimited subscription, plus a month of Arc Studio Pro. The free classes coming up. So we have today, which is our first page class. On the 21st, we have our Christmas Pitch Fest, so you can come with a pitch for a movie being a 2 to 3 minute explanation of the plot, essentially, that takes us around to the middle of the story, and then you want to kind of imply or suggest the rest of it. If you haven't watched a lot of these before, go to our YouTube channel and you'll find multiple videos from our pitch class, from our pitching course with Scott Barkin, that I really recommend you watch and kind of see what the pitfalls are and see where people go wrong or go off the rails and try to adjust your own pitch accordingly. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're not being graded, and we're not going to buy your movie idea or anything like that, but you can win prizes. And if you have a holiday-themed movie pitch, then we'll have a special category for that. So definitely come by 21st at 6 p.m. if that sounds interesting to you and you want to win some Script Camp merchandise. We have a class on how to sell your movie idea on the 28th at 6th, and that one is focused on communicating feature-length stories. So it's not really selling as in, we're going to sell this for money, but we mean sell it to somebody as in explain the idea to somebody and have them fully understand it. So that's going to be the Wednesday, 28th at 6th. Then we have a TV writing class, another free promotional one, Friday the 30th at 6 o'clock. And in the new year, the best protagonist for your story will be Friday the 6th at 11 a.m. That's going to be another one-off class on matching character to the story to make sure that you are choosing the right protagonist and investing the audience in the story in the right way. We then have Pilot Bootcamp Week 2 later that same day on the 6th at 6 p.m. And our new feature bootcamp starts Sunday, January 8th at 11 a.m. and runs for 8 weeks. So what are these boot camps? These take you from idea to first draft, or from a rough draft to a more polished rewrite if you're bringing a rewrite as opposed to something brand new. Normally, I do suggest that you come with brand new ideas and not with rewrites, but if you're willing to do a page one rewrite and to totally break apart a story and reimagine it from the ground up, it can still work. We're going to be using my step-by-step, very practical method with these 2-hour weekly classes, 8 weeks for feature, 6 weeks for pilot, and we've done in the past 4 weeks for short film or for pitching or for smaller scale classes like that. Currently, we're doing 12 weeks for novel. So, today I have some slides, but we're going to be spending most of our time in Google Docs. We will be looking at just what do these first couple pages have to do, and I want to break down the opening pages of 3 or 4 pro scripts. I'm going to be writing a first page of a script based on a prompt in sort of real time, just to kind of show you the techniques and tactics that I would use and the things to focus on. And we're going to have a time for you guys to do that as well, and we'll also have a time to share first pages for critique. So let's just get right into it, and I will just start on these lecture slides to make sure that we have enough time to get to everything, and that we can spend a good amount on the writing portion, because I know I always will be like, I'll give you 15 minutes, and then everyone's like, no, I need more time at the end. So we want to make sure we have enough time for all our activities today. Let's just dive right into this. So first 3 pages, it's sort of, we're talking kind of about the first 1 to 3 pages here, because this class is all on first page, but the job of these different sections, first page or first 3 pages, is very similar. One, we have to just essentially convince the reader to keep reading. That's the most important thing, because like we're dealing with a limited attention span on our reader, and whether you're getting a professional or like a studio reader to read you, in which case they have their own criteria and things they're looking for, but they're probably going to read it all the way through to the end because it's their job. Or it might just be a friend of yours, or a script swap partner, or anything like that. It might just be the random public that you're trying to solicit for their opinions on your script. So depending on who's reading, different people will have different levels of attention span and levels of commitment, but we can't really count on somebody reading our script all the way through to the end if they don't feel sufficiently drawn in and entertained by it. And that means that you have to think that any time that you're not drawing the reader in, you are actively pushing them away, and that the people that do read scripts for a living know what to look for very quickly to ascertain if you know what you're doing or if you don't. And one of the number one things you need to do is just, they always say, like, don't be boring, right? That means you need to hook us and bring us into this world and make us feel the sort of authorial voice and control that you have and set the tone for your story. And there's a lot of things that you need to do in these first few pages, but let's look at just a couple of these things here and break them down. So, number 1, we need to hook the reader. You can often do that by showing us a character trying to achieve a goal, but that little mini scenario ends in some kind of unexpected but ultimately fascinating way that kind of springboards us into the rest of the story, perhaps because it asks some kind of intriguing question that we are now sort of compelled to sit and keep watching to find out the answer to. Like, why did he do that? Or, like, what's going to happen? Like, what's going to happen next is sort of just, like, the basic question that you want to always be asking. But you can further ask a question like, what are the repercussions of that? Or what did that mean? Or, like, why did they do that? And it should be in such a way that we feel, like, confident that the writer will answer those questions. Because if we're left with the question of what did that mean, but, like, in a bad way, then we're erring on the side of confusion as opposed to mystery. And mystery is going to be a really powerful tool. No matter what genre you're writing, mystery is not only reserved for capital M, Agatha Christie stories. Mystery is a term that we're going to use frequently in respect to the idea of creating a question that the reader wants answered. Can somebody define and tell us what is the difference between mystery and confusion?
I'm trying to learn that every day and get better at that. But basically, like, even if we're trying to deliberately have the reader not understand the answer to a question, we don't want them to be confused about what we're describing on the page.
Yeah, so the key word there was deliberately, right?
Exactly.
So if we deliberately don't want the reader to know something, then, and we are sort of implying to them that if they keep reading, they will find out, and it's like an interesting question that we're left with. If the question we're left with is, wait, what just even happened? That's probably confusion and not mystery. Because confusion is when you don't know what's happened, even though the author probably intended you to, or you're not sure if they intended you to, or you just don't know what's going on. And a confused mind, especially in terms of consumers of media, a confused mind will usually shut down and say, I'm not interested in this anymore, because there's a million things I could be reading or watching that will really draw me in. And I have a long queue of, like, Oscar-winning movies I haven't seen yet that I could be watching any of those Why would I be wasting my time with something that's confusing me on the first page? So you need to really distinguish mystery and confusion, because you don't want the reader to know everything right away. We can't just include a synopsis that says this is what this movie's going to be about. But this first page, to answer that, or like in response to that, this first page needs to bring the reader in and make them wonder, what is this story about? Or make them say, that's an interesting character that I'd like to continue to follow. Or that's asked a question that I'm intrigued as to what the answer could be. And you're only going to really get that if you build a good amount of confidence. So establishing confidence on the first page is really, really key. It means that don't have typos on your first page. I've seen typos in the first line. I've seen typos in the first word. Like, if you're giving that to a reader and they're thinking, for the most part, when you're going out with scripts, this is after you've done, and I was talking yesterday in Writer's Lab, I've gone out with 3 scripts really wide, and on the minimum side, I did 8 drafts over 6 months. That's 0.8 drafts, or like 1.3 drafts a month, or whatever the math breaks down to there. But you can see how after 8 drafts in 6 months, there's not going to be typos on the first page, because I've done my due diligence, and you should too if you're going to actually ask somebody to commit the time and the brain power and the energy into reading a script of yours. Don't have typos on the first page. You shouldn't have any typos, but like, as we go on, this is how confidence works when it comes to reading. Like, after you build and establish confidence in those first few pages, and in your first 3, and in your first 10, then you will earn a sort of level of forgiveness, or once that confidence is high enough, we'll get to the point where if there's like a major typos later on, and we're intrigued and hooked by the story, we won't really care. But it's like, I always say, it's like, the signs that go up in the construction zone, it's like, fines here are doubled, meaning if you're speeding in the construction zone, your ticket will be twice as much. It's like that in the first 10 pages of your script. The fines are doubled. So any damage that you deal to the reader's confidence is exponentially worse in these first few pages, because then it just feels like you don't know what you're doing at all and that you're wasting the reader's time. And we don't want to give them that impression. We want them to feel like they're in good hands. Readers want to read something amazing, so they're just waiting. They're like desperately hoping that this will be the thing that hooks them and brings them in. They don't want to read bad stuff. They want to read great stuff. Of course they do. So we need to be considering the reader and keeping them in our mind the entire time. What are they reading for? What would build confidence with them? And how do we show them that we are in total control of the material on the page? So here's some other tips and things that you can do. We can establish our central characters. It's often going to be the central protagonist in the first page, or in the first 3 pages. It doesn't absolutely have to be. We can open on something else. So you can open on the villain, or sometimes on a side character. Pretty rarely do we open on side characters. But the longer that we go without finding someone to sort of hitch our wagon to, so to speak, and find someone to actually invest in their journey and continue watching for them, regardless of if they're the hero or the villain, or like what their sort of role is in the narrative, the more your reader will start to drift away. If we don't know whom we are supposed to follow, the longer that we go not knowing whom we're supposed to follow or what is important, the more that the reader's attention will start to sag and wane. And that is not what we want. So we're going to be introducing probably the main conflict, or at least like suggesting what the main conflict will be. Early on, it's nice to like maybe put a few of those initial dominoes into place that are going to topple over the next couple hours. But we're going to want to learn who your main characters are, either hero or villain, or maybe someone else, through and during their conflict. So we can't just include a dossier about the character at the beginning that explains who they are. We have to see who they are by watching them do stuff. And the best way to characterize is through the use of unusual choices. So if every scene, especially in those, remember the first 10 scenes, the speeding zone or whatever, if in all of those scenes the exact thing happens that we thought would happen, like if you ask an average audience member, how do you think that scene will go? And then they could just tell you right away, did we even need to include those scenes? Usually not. So you need to be considering carefully why we're showing this. And like, if this first thing is not part of the main conflict, is it tangentially related to the main conflict? Is it like a mini version of the main conflict in some way? Are we suggesting what the themes are going to be? Like, you just need to have a really good reason for why you've chosen this to be your opening scene. And often this makes really good real estate and story space for you to establish what is missing in the main character's life. What do they want to do? Who are they right now at this stage? And that's kind of telling us what they need to change from. The starting point is where they're going to, the character begins. But since movies are about characters changing pretty drastically, it's not like TV, and it's not like, really long novels where they're more about gradual character change over time. Movies are about characters changing pretty drastically through the most important events of their entire lives. So, and most of the time, a movie will focus on the most important events of this character's life, at least thus far. There are some exceptions to that, and you will sometimes see like a slice of life or like a mumblecore movie where it's kind of like just another day, or sometimes the fact that it is just another day kind of like adds to the story somehow. Like Judge Dredd, for instance, the Dredd movie from 2012, at the end of it, it's like, was this the most important drug bust of Dredd's career? I don't really think so, but we weren't really watching Dredd change. We're watching Anderson change, because that's an iconic character that's supposed to kind of inspire and evoke change in someone else, as opposed, which we also talked about in a couple classes yesterday, I think. In any case, I'm getting a little off track, but you can introduce these main conflicts in these first couple pages if you can. So if you can, like, especially for something like a mystery or like a thriller, you don't really want to waste any space, and we're trained to read those genres in such a way that we're looking for clues and we're always scanning, like, how does that fit into the bigger picture of things? So if your opening scene is like the first clue falling into place, that can be really useful, even if we don't know what it means yet or how it's going to fit into the larger narrative yet. If it's just like that first thing happening that is going to set up the whole story, that's usually a great way to think of your very first page. So it's nice if you can end your first page as well with something that kind of, this is a very advanced technique, so if you're just starting out, don't worry about this, but if you can end page one with something essential about your story, like the theme, the conflict, whatever is at the root of this and why you want to tell it, if the literal last line of the first page can be something like that, then that's great and does a lot to build confidence. Or if you can like make the whole opening scene fit very neatly and precisely on the first page, that will just feel like you have a lot of control. It doesn't always mean you have a lot of control, but it kind of feels like a red flag for it. So first 10 pages we won't talk as much about, because today we're mostly looking at very first page. So be thinking opening scene, and it might not even be all of the opening scene, and a lot of the time we'll see, even in proscripts, the first scene will be the first page and like a bit of the next one, or maybe like 2 to 3 pages for the opening scene. When we look at cold opens for pilots, they can be anywhere up to 3, maybe even 4 or 5 in really long pilots. 1 page is like a really quick unit of time. Often we're going to say a page is a minute of screen time. That's not always true, but it's kind of like the best metric that we have. So in these first 10 pages in the intro of your story, you're trying to establish the normal version of this world, because if we show it already changing or already radically being altered, then we won't know what was altered or what it was changed from. So we're trying to learn about its unique rules and terminology, see it function as it's kind of, quote, supposed to, we might say, and especially this is important if things are going to drastically change in the nature of the world itself. So we might want to ask an intriguing question. We often do. And that first question that we're going to always ask, we default to this question of what's going to happen next, which is obviously like, we always want the reader to be wondering that. But besides that, you can set up and answer several smaller questions, even within the confines of the first page, to build that trust and that confidence, and then consider leaving 1 or 2 of them hanging, making the reader kind of say, I want to know the answer, and I'm confident that if I keep reading, I will find out, which is ultimately the sensation that, or the sense that we want to leave everyone with in our first couple pages. Okay, so, let me check the chat to see if we have any comments or questions so far. It looks like some folks did actually comment on the mystery confusion thing. Lee says mystery compels you to stay engaged or feels like you're in on it. Yeah, I think that's a good way of summing it up. Faye says mystery is leading somewhere. Confusion is the finale episode of Peripheral. I haven't seen that, so I couldn't tell you. But yeah, mystery usually will feel like it's leading somewhere, and like there is an answer to this, and it's not like we missed something. Confusion usually is going to make you feel like you just sort of missed something. Nacho says, not sure if this is the same for others, but when I read something that raises an interesting mystery or question, it doesn't slow down the read. Instead, I quickly continue reading to the next page. Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. If I read something confusing, I usually have to backtrack and reread the previous sentence to try to understand what the writer meant. That's a great definition, Nacho. We should sticky that in the classroom thread. Because that's, like, if everything's going well, we should never have to flip back pages. We shouldn't feel like we need to go back and check something that we may have missed, because your reader doesn't really have the ability, or we should pretend they don't have the ability to do that. We need to pretend they're reading the pages at an even, consistent rate, and every time they don't understand something or need to read something again, we lose points on that confidence meter, the invisible video game health bar that represents how much confidence that your reader has in you and your ability to fulfill the promises that you've made and to pay off the setups that you've put into place. So if that meter gets too low, we're going to hit that threshold, and every reader has a threshold in a different place. Like if you paid someone to read your script, they don't really have a threshold where they'll stop reading, but they have a threshold where they'll start skimming, and they'll be like, okay, this is a pass. I don't need to read the rest of this very carefully. So everyone's like, no one's completely immune to that, and we need to always be aware that readers have a point where they will start to lose interest. So you can't mess around in your first few pages. This is a delicate dance that we're trying to do here. Okay, so yeah, consider answering those easy first couple questions, and like you see almost like a hack that people have used in the past couple of years to do this. It's not really a hack, and a lot of people do this, and it works fine, and sometimes it works great, but it's just overused nowadays. But it's the open over black thing, where we start with a black screen, and we'll hear a sound, or there will be a quote or something like that, and we'll sort of like then smash cut to where we like the location that we're in. And I think a lot of the time the readers or the writers is kind of envisioning that this will be like as they are fading up the logos for the production companies and stuff and the studios at the beginning of the movie. That's when we're going to be hearing these sounds. And that, like, it pretty much does work, but it works in the same way that the scene in the slasher movie where the character's hiding in the closet and looking through the slats of the closet as the killer goes around the room looking for them always works. It always works because it always works, but like the fact that it always works means that everyone did it for a while, and like we have seen every permutation of it. So I recommend at this point, don't open over black. I know it's kind of controversial to say, but just start us on a strong, attention-grabbing, interesting opening image. Don't use this crutch of, oh, I'm gonna open over black, then make you wonder what's that sound, or wonder what we're hearing, then smash cut to reveal that sound, because that's just like a really easy way to build that confidence and that sense of setting up small questions, then answering them. We've just seen it so much. It's also the same as the opening where we start with something exciting from later on down the line in the story, and then we smash cut to black, and we're like 3 weeks earlier. It's so overplayed now. Just unless you have some fantastic and amazing original reason for doing that, Breaking Bad ruined that for everybody, and everyone was doing that for a while, so it just lost a lot of its effect and impact. So some of these things, especially in something like screenwriting, it's not that they don't work. It's just that we've seen them so many times that you start to wonder, does this writer actually have an original take on this? Do they have a fresh voice? And since those are primarily the things that we're trying to showcase with spec work, you might as well just do something different. So, what else? We're building up to the catalyst. You don't have to have your catalyst on your first page. There are certain stories where it almost feels like the catalyst is on the first page, especially horror thriller type stories where it's like, I'm thinking Train to Busan, for instance, where our opening scene is there's a truck driving along a rural road, and it hits a deer, and then the deer is totally dead. The truck driver drives away, and then we see the deer get back up, and its neck sort of like snaps back into place, and it's a zombie deer, right? Is that the inciting incident? Not really. You could sort of see it as that, or like The Host is another Korean horror movie that opens with like dumb American scientists pour chemicals into the water, and we understand, okay, this is gonna create the monster that we see later on. So creature features a lot of the time will open with something that you might sort of imagine to be the catalyst, but then later on, like 10 to 12 minutes in, we're going to need something to actually function as your real catalyst. So don't think that, oh, I got the catalyst out of the way, because the catalyst is just the first thing that happens. That's not always the case at all. So we were building up to the catalyst, though, so we are laying those essential pieces in place that are going to get us there, and our first 10 pages are going to, your intro is going to end around maybe 9 to 15 or something like that with an event, and I'm talking features, by the way. I'm mostly talking features. I'll designate if I'm talking pilots. But in a feature, we're going up to around 10 to 15, which will lead us to some kind of event that shakes up the normal world and forces your main character out of their comfort zone, and it unveils a kind of doorway to them, and it says, hey, here's a door you could go through, and maybe that's as simple as they get a new job offering, or they get a new case. They're a detective who gets their new case, and that case sort of represents, a threshold or a doorway. And it's going to force your protagonist to act somehow, even if the way they're going to act, like, even if it's their job, they still should feel like they have the opportunity to turn it down, or even if they're a soldier going into war, and the catalyst is like, you got your orders now. Well, it's helpful then in that case during the following sequence to have a bunch of deserters say something like, hey, we can escape and we can not go on this mission. You want to come with us? And then it actually does become the act of your character choosing to go on this journey. So that's just really useful to have the if your main character seems like they have no choice but to go on this journey, give them some kind of choice to make it feel like it matters more. Hope that makes sense. And we're really just leading up to beginning that journey of change and transformation for the main character, which is going to kick off fully once we break into the second act around pages 20 to 30, maybe 25 is a good place to put that. The last thing we're doing in our first few pages is we're establishing the tone and the style. So like the types of words that you're using, the sort of atmosphere that you're building, and the details that you're choosing to linger on and focus, and the things that your camera seems kind of like fascinated by or attracted to. All of those things will be leading up to building this sense of mood and this sense of this is the vibe or the feeling of this story. This is the emotion that you're going to feel all throughout. This is the kind of, even it might just be like the tactile environment that we're in, if you want to really emphasize the, a barren, brutal, bitter landscape that feels like survival is almost impossible here. You would probably do that on page 1. Or if you want to establish, like, for instance, this very sort of cold, journalistic, and kind of icy thriller environment like we do in Gone Girl, these first few pages are going to make it feel like an autumn morning, basically. And like, it's like 5 a.m. in the middle of November is like the kind of the environment and the feeling and the vibe of a lot of Gillian Flynn stories. So we're establishing the tone and the style and the things that you focus on, the details that you choose, the things that you linger on and emphasize. All of that is doing a lot to build the sort of voice that you're using for this. And the voice, although that comes third in our sort of hierarchy of most important elements of writing, because at the top we have clarity, brevity, and then voice, number 3. Number 3 is still important, especially because we're trying to build that reader confidence in these early pages. We want to feel like there is a voice here, and there's a personality, and there's a POV, there's a point of view to this storyteller. It's not just like somebody very clinically telling us every single thing that happens, like they're just observing a science experiment or something like that. It's helpful if we feel that the POV has a kind of like an opinion on what's going on here. And I think we'll see some examples of that as we break down our pro first pages today. So the audience is just floating freely until we give them somewhere to land. So let's remember that the earlier that we establish and attach to a hero, the easier it is for the audience to get invested. And we're always going to default to the person that we relate to more. Yesterday in our novel class, we listened to a section of an audiobook where our opening scene with this character is just a guy walking with a cane very painfully down a hallway until he reaches a set of stairs. And then he struggles down every single stair, agonizingly painfully, until he falls down the last couple and lands in a heap. And we really just get into his head and his point of view, and we feel like we are this guy as this wave of pain washes over him, and you feel like a lot of pity and sympathy for this character. And then you find out he's the castle torturer. And that does interesting things to us. That makes us lean in and say, oh my gosh, I understand and sympathize with this person. When we sympathize with someone, we're using the same part of our brain as we use to empathize with them, right? So if you make us connect with the character, it doesn't really matter how bad or good of a person they are. Villains and antiheroes are equally intriguing. So it can be even more compelling sometimes to show a character who is morally challenging in some way, or is doing some bad thing, or something that we wouldn't do ourselves, but then we see why they're doing it, or the fact that we relate to them. All these things are going to be ways of just bringing your audience in so that they can start to attach to a character and invest in the next 2 hours of journey, and we want them to not put the script down. So yeah, don't bounce around too much at the beginning. We're in your first 20-25 pages of a feature script. We're trying to find who are we following, who are we investing in, and who are we trying to care about, who are we trying to get us to care about. And the more that you test that, our sense of identity, this is from a Dan Harmon article, I believe he says, our sense of identity weakens a little every time it is switched or tested. So that's not to say that you can't be establishing several characters in your first 5 to 10 pages, but for your first page, probably don't skip around way too much. Okay, so we're setting up the normal world. So this is going to be showing us kind of what is your the world like before the catalyst happens. So that's going to be at the very beginning when the audience has their mind open for basically anything. Their suspension of disbelief is pretty broad. And as the story progresses, the viewer will unconsciously form a frame for what is possible and what is not possible within the framework of that. So I know I was talking creature features a second ago, but you can sort of see why they do that, because often in a creature feature, it's going to be opening scene established, there's a monster in this movie. And then the next 10 to 15 minutes are going to be us meeting all the characters, and we're coming to the cabin by the lake where there's a giant octopus or whatever it is. But you see why in the opening scene we need to set and calibrate the reader's expectations properly, because now they know there's a monster in this. We're leading up to the reveal of the monster, and that way you can also build a bit of suspense all throughout those first 10 pages, right? Because it's like, well, we know there was a giant octopus, and we know now we see some kids moving into a cabin by a lake, and then we see there's a trail of slime across the floor, and they're like, oh, I guess somebody spilled some food here, and we're like, oh no, that's the octopus from the beginning. So it allows us to build a little bit of suspense a little bit easier that way. So consider how your first page can affect how we view the next 10 to 15 in a really effective way in some genres. And if there's going to be something like an element of the supernatural or an element of sci-fi, it's really useful to try to get that out of the way, or at least hint at that in the first 3 pages. Otherwise, if we wait way too long before introducing it, the readers can run the risk of being thrown out of the story and being like, wait, that's what this is about? How come that wasn't telegraphed to me at all? There are rare exceptions where we really actually want it to come out of the blue, and in so doing, we will bring the reader or audience into the story even more, because they're like, oh, wait, that's where this has been going? I didn't see that coming. But those are rare occasions where that works. Like, I'm thinking of the Green Mile, for instance, where it's like, 35 or 40 minutes before we find out about the magic stuff. Or maybe even more. It's like the midpoint of the story almost. So there's really rare occasions where you want to blindside everybody later on. So these first few pages are really important for setting those expectations and for setting promises. Because promises are going to be a big part of telling stories. It's like we say, you have to wait for this to happen, and we're going to track our progress towards this thing, but it's going to feel more earned and more worthwhile when we finally get there if we set up that expectation early on. Especially if we set up an expectation early on and we say something like, here's the worst villain in the world. They're absolutely unbeatable. No one could ever beat them. I'm thinking like The Matrix, right? Where in our opening scenes, we see everyone sees an agent in The Matrix. They're like, run. We cannot fight those guys. We see them punching through concrete. We see them jumping from building to building. They're like super villains, right? They cannot be defeated. And then since we established that in our first 3 pages, right, it becomes so much more impactful later on when our main character actually makes a stand and says, no, I'm fighting an agent. I am evolving as a character. I'm changing, and I am becoming the person I kind of need to be. So set those expectations up in these first few pages, and we're trying to like set rules and boundaries in place. And then if you're later, it's vital to do that if you're going to later then be subverting or undercutting or trying to like overcome those boundaries in some way. So first few pages are about expectations and promises. Okay, so I want to stop for questions, and then we'll look at a few of our pro examples today to break down. We're going to be looking at House of Cards Pilot by Bill Williman, The Black Belt by Randall Green, and Lock and Key Episode 1 by Joe Hill. So let me pause and see, do we have any questions so far on anything I've talked about up until this point?
I came in late, and I'm sorry I could not get connected, so I missed most of what you said.
Oh, that's okay. You can watch this back later. It'll be on YouTube.
Oh, cool. Okay. So my question is, promises does that mean like what you're saying if you talk about, that this movie, the script is going to be about the worst villain in the world, and well, you've got to make the script about the worst villain in the world, unless of course it's a comedy or a parody, and so you've got to live up to that. You can't have some like kind of not so bad villain, maybe somebody with a villain with a heart of gold or something, or just somebody that's just not that bad. Is that what you mean, that by keeping promises?
Well, for instance, if in your opening page you establish this guy is the worst supervillain that ever lived, and then he's defeated like it's no problem halfway through the story, then your audience is going to feel betrayed. They're going to feel like, wait, you told me that was the worst villain ever. I felt like we're going to have to take the whole movie to beat that guy. Like, you sort of set up, it would take somebody of equal power to surpass him, but then your main character achieved that power like it was nothing. That just doesn't feel satisfying. So if it feels like you're breaking, or like imagine I mentioned the giant octopus movie. If there's a giant octopus in the opening scene, and then we don't see that giant octopus again the whole movie, your audience is going to be like, wait, you promised me there was going to be a monster. Why is it not in the movie? So
right, exactly. I mean, and yeah, if that's just, or if it, I agree. If it's just has no meaning, that's like, why did you put that in there? That's confusing, and like, why did you put that in there? It's a waste of film, and writing.
Exactly. So yeah, that's what we're talking about in terms of promises. It's like what you're telling the reader to look forward to and to expect, and the things that you're going to pay off later. So it means, like, if we set something up, that means you put a story element in place that seems like it's going to have some kind of reaction or some kind of result. Then later on, we should see what the result of that is. If you set things up and don't pay them off, it's going to feel like we're missing something, or like there's something wrong with there's pages missing from the script or something.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Sure. Any other questions on anything we've talked about so far? Let me turn on my room light really quick to get rid of this glare. Okay, any other questions? Question in the chat: are these scripts available for our review someplace? Yeah, sure. These are I just found these with a quick Google search, and I can just link them to the class as we get to them. There's the Lock and Key pilot. Yeah, Nacho has linked to the Lock and Key already. Thanks, tomorrow. Okay, so I think someone's typing, but I will check back in the chat in just a moment. Oh, here's a question from Willow. I have heard multiple opinions on this. What do you think about characters' names changing later in the script? Like a mysterious person is named Shadow Man, then later we get an actual name. You can do that. You definitely can. It is whenever you can, I would just stick with one name for the person. But if for some reason you're intending, like the audience is not intended to know who they are to begin with, or like they changed their identity, or we reveal they were in disguise, or something like that, then it can be fine to do. You just want to make sure the reader doesn't miss it, so put it like really big in the middle that says he will now be known, like as he takes off his mask, he reveals he is in fact Joe, and like Joe is underlined in bold or whatever, so we see, okay, the character name is now definitively changing. Just make sure we don't miss it, or else because like if your reader is skimming or they're reading pretty quickly, it's easy to miss something like that. Good question though. Amanda says underlined and bold. Yeah, you can always bold, underline. You can use whatever sort of emphatics you want.
It would your character's name change a lot if they were a spy?
I probably would not recommend it, because if we know who they are, if the audience knows who they are, you probably want to refer to them by the same name, so it doesn't seem like you're talking about different people.
Well, what I mean is that, like, the spy, they first say, like, okay, let's just take Jason Bourne. So his real name is not Jason Bourne. Let's pretend like his name is Jim Smith. Okay, that's his real name, but he goes by Jason Bourne. But he keeps lying to the protagonist to get, and I'm making this up because that's not what happens. I'm just using that. Or James Bond. Let's pretend that instead of James Bond always saying, "Hi, I'm Bond, James Bond," he goes around saying, "I'm, James Smith, Smith, James Smith." And then he lies again to the protagonist, for whatever reason. And he says, my name is, Archibald, Whittlesworth, that's my real name. And, I go by this name because, well, Archibald Whittlesworth is kind of hard to say, and then, finally in the end, he comes clean and he's Bond, James Bond, but let's just pretend this is the first Bond movie, and for some reason he keeps lying because he's a spy for part of the drama. Could you do that?
Yes, you could.
Okay.
You want to use
I know it'd be clumsy, but
yeah, it'd be tricky. That's the thing, is you want to use as few names for a character as you possibly can. You want to use one for every character if you can. If you can't use just one for some reason, like for instance, if the audience doesn't know who this person is yet, they come and introduce themselves, and that's the only name we have for them, then you might have to, it's true, you might have to change it later on once they reveal their true identity or whatever. We probably don't want to do that multiple times, and if we're going to be doing that multiple times and it's some character that's always changing their identity, maybe you just refer to them by their code name or something like that, you're like, now, oh, we see the Bumblebee again, except this time he's wearing a suit and he's got a hat, whatever it is. Right. So you might just have to just try to use the same name as much as possible. The goal is for the reader to be able to picture what's going on, and we need to know, oh, that's the same actor as before. And that's what's important. It's more important to do that than to keep up with however that character is presenting themselves at any given time. So regardless of whatever alias they're using, use as few names as possible and make sure the reader knows who we're looking at.
Well, like in my romance novel, my female protagonist, her name is Sakura. That's her first name. She's half Japanese. And her middle name is Michaela, and because she's half German. And her family and friends call her Shelley, but every time, she has to present her license, it's Sakura, and, in Japanese it's Sakura, but people can never pronounce it. And so she just told them, it's Cherry Blossom, And so, like if she's at a restaurant, they say, Miss Cherry Blossom. So, but her family calls her Shelley, and her friends call her Shelley, because she moves back to America. So I put that in my romance novel to illustrate what it's like to have a difficult first name and go by an easy middle name, you
Hmm.
know, because well, I actually have that is a reality, and I thought I'm going to put that in my character because that happens to people all the time, you know. So but it's never like that person keeps being called all the time by that name and then it changes. It's she only gets called by that name by formal occasions, and she's like, no, just you can't pronounce it. Here's the meaning. So, you know.
Right.
Anyway,
So in a book, the rules are a little bit different. You should just use whatever name you like. Again, try to be consistent and try to use as few names as possible, because the more names you give to a person, the more confusing it has the potential to be.
I
But
see.
in a book, I would use whatever name that character, if we're in that character's point of view, whatever name they identify with the most. So
Oh, okay.
that's how I would think of it. Like whatever they would prefer to be called is what I would mostly call them in the just narration of a book.
Okay. Well, like if you get stopped by a police officer, or you get stopped if you're getting on a plane, they always call you by your first name. They don't say, "What do you prefer to be called?" That's
Hmm.
just never the case. This is federal or state, you know.
Right.
So it's in those instances where she gets called that, you know, and
Sure. Yeah, that's
so
fine.
okay.
You can totally do that. You can refer to characters by whatever name makes the most sense for them in that moment. But try to be as consistent as possible and try to be as not confusing as possible.
Mm. I'm planning to, because it's not like every other page this is going to happen to her,
Right, right, yeah. It
you
shouldn't
know.
happen all the time.
Right. It's just occasionally like she has to get on a plane, or if she gets stopped by the cops, you know.
Sure, sure. Any other questions before we look at our proscripts?
Oh, where'd you go?
All right, let's take a look. So I'm going to. I guess this is actually. Hang on. So I will link this to you guys just so that you can read along. If, for instance, oh, I just had it up. Here it is. It's this one, right? Just want to make sure it's the US one, not the UK one. Sorry. I think it's here. I don't want to make you guys download it from some sketchy source, though. Is it not just... Nacho, would you mind finding the pilot for House of Cards and posting it in the chat just so folks can read along if they can't read on our screen for some reason? So we will have that link up in just a moment, but for now, let's look at it just on my shared screen. So you can click next to my name where it says the word live if you've not already joined our video presentation. And you can watch along as I'm going to just scroll down and we're going to read the first page of the Netflix show House of Cards. Thanks, Nacho. So that's in the chat if you're having trouble seeing on our screen for some reason, or if you're on a phone or some device that can't follow along. All right, so we have a question in the chat. I thought we were doing Lock and Key. That's on the list. We have a couple to get through first. So let's take a look. First page of House of Cards. We start interior, grand ballroom, seconds until midnight. So most of the time we are using day or night as our slug lines, but here you can see sometimes being more specific does actually kind of matter. And you might use, if it's like a werewolf movie, you might say midnight, right? Or here it's the day before, it's New Year's Eve, so it does actually really matter that it's before midnight. So generally go with day or night, but sometimes you can be a little more specific. A loud, raucous countdown. DC's Democratic Party elite are watching the Times Square ball drop on massive monitors. 3, 2, 1. Noisemakers. Applause. People kiss and hug. The sound fades as one face in the crowd, Representative Francis Frank Underwood, turns directly to the camera. Oh, look, in our second paragraph, we've introduced the main character. Underwood is Richard III, Iago, and Hannibal Lecter all rolled into one. Sly, intelligent eyes, a mischievous smirk, and a deep baritone dripping with southern charm. So, super succinct, to the point character description, only barely 3 lines, all very visual, and although it's a bit unfilmable to say Richard III, Iago, and Hannibal Lecter, we get the kind of like playability of those descriptions. Sly and intelligent eyes, mischievous smirk, baritone voice. So we're describing how he's about to speak and how he acts all the time. You can definitely go into a little bit more detail on your most important characters in your descriptions if you want, including maybe the way that they speak or any kind of like aspects of their personality that the actor would be able to play. Here's what Frank says. Nothing lasts forever. 1 year comes to an end, shuffling off like a haggard old man, and a new babe is ushered into the world to take his place. So we're already setting the main rule of the show, which is that Frank can address the camera and has this sort of narrative power where he can speak to the audience and kind of narrate what's going on. We pan to the stage to reveal a beaming Garrett Walker, late 40s, the apotheosis of leadership, charisma, and dignity. He's flanked by his family, wife Patricia and 2 teenage sons. They lead the crowd in Auld Lang Syne. So we're meeting some of the other most important people, but we're allowing our main character to introduce them to us here. And now we've switched to VO. So now that we have gone off screen, Frank can continue to talk to us, even though he's not right in the camera's face. He can continue to sort of use his narrative power like this. He tells us, President-elect Garrett Walker, in case you've been hiding in a cave these last 2 years, doesn't he just glow? So we learn here that we're going to be using fictionalized politicians in this world, and that's sort of cluing us into the fact that, okay, don't worry, you don't have to connect this to any real-life public figures, but we're going to be building sort of a brand new political cast just right here. We shift focus to Walker's soon-to-be VP Jim Matthews in his early 60s and his large gaggle of a family. And Frank tells us, if anything ever happened to Walker, God forbid, Jim Matthews will take his place. Until then, he'll do what all vice presidents do. Absolutely nothing. We shift focus once more to just off stage, where Walker's recently appointed chief of staff, Linda Vasquez, is speaking to an elderly senator. If this were a student script, I'd be like, where's the description of Linda? But sometimes with pro scripts like this, or with pilots, it's like they may have already cast somebody as that character. They may not always need to describe the character fully, so it doesn't... You'll sometimes see a pro script where you're like, why didn't they describe the character at all? Various reasons. There's various reasons why. Don't worry too much. So, he tells us the wizard behind the curtain, or shall we say which? Linda Vasquez, Walker's chief of staff. She never stops working, not even on New Year's Eve. The shot now widens as we pan over the sea of people singing. That's all we get on our first page. I'm going to just go down a couple more lines just to kind of round out the scene, because it's not that much more, and just give you the sense of how this is drawing us into the world a little bit. Let's wrap this up. So Frank tells us congressmen, congresswomen, senators, governors, mayors, contenders, hopefuls, wannabes, and has-beens, anyone and everyone who matters and doesn't matter in the Democratic Party. The camera settles back on Underwood standing next to his perfectly groomed wife Claire, and he says, as for me, I'm the chief whip, House Majority Whip to be exact. He narrows his eyes and offers a generous smile, and he says, welcome to Washington. And we cut to our title and credits. So in this opening scene, we are doing all of the things that we talked about in our slideshow up until now. We are establishing the protagonist. We are setting the tone and the style of storytelling here. We're learning the major rules and some of the major players that are going to be taking part in this story. We've met, I think, 3 main characters besides our central protagonist. And this is about what you have. This is like a lot going on one page for sure, but it's not overwhelming. We don't weigh us down with way too many things happening. We don't have tons of actions. We don't have tons of objectives. In fact, this is mostly a discovery scene that doesn't really have a primary objective for our main character, besides our main character's objective here is essentially, I'm going to be your guide to this world. He's saying, I'm going to tell you about what's going on here so you can follow me, and like, you're going to be like the little, how would we describe it? He's like your confidant. He's going to confide in the audience, and he's going to kind of peel back the curtain to tell them how things really work around here. We definitely are clued into that in the way that he says things like, until then he'll do what all vice presidents do. Absolutely nothing. So we're learning this main character is going to kind of cut through all the noise, and he's going to be the one to tell us how things really are in Washington, and he's going to be our kind of like inside look into this world. Okay, so plenty of stuff happening in these first pages. What else do you guys notice, or what do you learn from this opening page alone?
The general pacing of it, that it's going to be kind of a very quick, cutthroat type of both in dialogue and presentation.
Yeah, I think so. We're going to be experiencing this world through Frank, and he's a very cutthroat, very vicious guy who always is trying to, get one over on his opponents, always achieve his objectives, and always move on to the next one. He's always trying to conquer his enemies, and we are him for the purposes of the story.
So, question, if I may?
Mm-hmm.
it says this guy is all those three people rolled into one. But what if you're pitching this script and the person doesn't know all three of those people?
That's a risk that you run.
Like, there's multiple Iagos people might be thinking about.
There are? What's the non-Shakespearean Iago that people are confusing here?
The Aladdin parrot.
That's named after the Shakespearean character.
Well, yes, not a lot of people do know that, though. But not a lot of people who are in film are probably going to be on stage, are going to be too... I don't know. Are people in film enthused about stage plays?
Sometimes. I mean, these are some of the most famous characters in all of literature and of all time. Like, you're right that there's a chance that the reader won't know who you're referencing if you're referencing real-world figures.
Especially for Shakespeare. If you want to learn about King Richard, those stories are long.
That's true. You're right.
Really long. They could be 6 hours long to just read through a Shakespeare play in its truest form.
You're right, and there is a risk associated with doing stuff like this. I think when it comes to really, really kind of mainstream characters like major biblical figures, I think you can mention Adam and Eve and things like that. You can mention Shakespearean characters. It's setting the tone for like the kind of story this is going to be, where it's saying like he's going to resemble those characters not just in how he acts and how he looks and how he sort of behaves, but also this is going to be a story that's along similar lines. A lot of people do compare House of Cards to a Shakespearean tragedy, so that's kind of cluing us in that it's going to be a story like that.
All right, my thought has always been like, don't compare in case you find the 1 or 2 or 50 people that does not know who these characters are.
It's a risk. You're right. You're totally right. But for instance, if you were writing a movie, see, this is a political drama that turns into like a tragedy, right? Whereas if you were writing a story about influencers, or you were writing a story about, modern Hollywood, you could probably reference like Tom Cruise or like major producers, or you can mention like major Hollywood figures in a story like that. It's cluing us into the world that we're getting into. And if the reader doesn't know them, it's possible. But if they're reading a story that's set in this world, then chances are they're going to be a little bit more in tune with the references that you're making. But it's possible that you can lose the reader with stuff like that. Very true.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying Richard III, Iago, and Hannibal Lecter, perhaps you could, either explain that to the actor when they read for the part, or maybe something that I think most people have heard is, even if you don't have a complete education, would be like Machiavelli.
Sure.
Or you could just simply try, Satan,
Sure.
Because this guy seems to be like, oh, well, if the devil were going to become the president, then yeah,
Yep. You're right.
So that's just my feeling. You might say, Machiavelli and Satan all rolled into one,
Sure. Yeah, you can always do that. You can, for your own work, you can pick references that you think the reader will get. And often you have to count on your reader is going to be a 19-year-old Hollywood intern. And you should generally try to write with the frame of mind that that's who we need to write a story that they can understand. But there's exceptions to this, and there's, your mileage will really vary on this. You can use whatever references you want in your own work, though, for sure.
But
I'm just thinking that if you were the producer, and, of course I realize we're not supposed to be producers, but if you were the producer and you had some 19-year-old reading for this, well, no, you wouldn't have a 19-year-old reading for this. You'd have a 40-something-year-old reading for this, or 45 or 50 or older reading for that. But if they, by chance, they just didn't know those things, you could just say, the guy's Satan.
Sure. Yes, you can definitely do that.
Okay.
Although this actually brings up another question.
Mm-hmm.
You could just say Underwood, sly, intelligent eyes, a mischievous smirk, a deep baritone dripping with southern charm. What is lost if we don't have the fact? We're telling us that he's like these three characters, and we're telling us what that means anyway in the very next line, meaning it's a wasted space. You know what I mean?
It's not very much space. It's only 3 lines for this entire description of the main character for a multi-season show. So when you are describing this,
but when it's the first page, every little millimeter counts. That's what I keep hearing, and I take that to its literal extreme.
Oh, well, there's no need to take it to a absolute extreme. It's worth spending if you're going to spend extra words describing any character, your main character is an important one. You're trying to write a script that an actor will read and get excited about playing that character, right? So if an actor reads, oh, it's like Hannibal Lecter meets Richard III, they might get like interested and excited by that. And that it's worth taking the time to characterize the most important people more. And it's really not that much room. It's less than 3 lines. So no wasted space here.
All right, I'm still getting used to brevity, as strange as that sounds.
Right, yeah, no, it definitely is important to pay attention to, for sure. You have the right instinct, absolutely. Shall we move on to our next one? Let's look at The Black Belt by Randall Green. Randall Green, one of the absolute best spec writers in Hollywood, has never had a movie produced, as far as I know, but really instructive to read his scripts. He is just fantastic at this format. And we do open with something over black. I mentioned everyone was doing this. Pro spec writers were all doing this for a while. It's not that it's bad to do. It always works. I just recommend finding a different thing to do for your own scripts. But let's just get started. Let's read through. Okay, so this is a coming-of-age comedy, by the way. All right, we open over black, and we hear a character named Gecko. We don't know who this is, but he says, if we kill him, the next one may be worse, and we can't kill them all. We'd better carry out teacher's orders. We're kind of like, who on earth is that? What does that mean? And we go right to an airplane, and we see Simon Paluska, 13, sits in a window seat watching a classic movie on an old portable DVD player, 1978's Kung Fu classic 5 Deadly Venoms. Okay, so we didn't really need to... We did that to kind of ask that little question of who could that be, what could that mean, and we quickly realized, oh, it's a character in a Kung Fu movie. The source of Gecko's sage words, he even tells us. This is a modern airplane in modern times with TVs in the back of every seat. Still, a portable DVD player. Kind of, remember, unusual choices right away will start to help characterize a little bit more. Simon is an awkward lump of a still-forming pubescent human. Not fat or thin, not tall or short, he wears a Buffalo Sabre sweatshirt and inexpensive jeans. What he does not wear is headphones. The DVD's audio emits from the player's speakers, quietly. He is considerate, this kid. Simon mouths along to the dialogue. He even mimics some of the kung fu moves best he can, given the confines. The middle seat of the row is empty. The aisle seat, decidedly not. A man, a tired man, gestures to the flight attendant. The man whispers to the attendant, who looks to Simon. And she says, sweetie, do you have headphones you can use with that, or can I give you some? And Simon, notice the parentheses from his trance. He says, they broke. The thing broke off in the hole. Flight attendant says, I'll need to ask you to mute the device, as a consideration to your fellow passengers. He says, the mute's broken too. The flight attendant's look turns even more apologetic. So, parentheticals. Randall Green is the absolute master of parentheticals. Notice how there's many ways you could have read this. You could have read this as stern or commanding. I need to ask you to mute the device as a consideration to your fellow passengers. Might be the way that we default to reading that, unless we have this parenthetical here that clarifies the intention behind the line, which is what parentheticals are all about. Randall Green uses really creative and really precise parentheticals throughout his scripts. I recommend, if you don't know how to use them, you should read this, Cartoon Girl, and the Swimsuit edition. Or Swimsuit issue, I think it's called. Okay, so let's go through this a little bit more. We are establishing our main character. It doesn't really have much of an objective here beyond just keep watching and enjoying his movie. And then the thing standing in the way is our passengers who are kind of annoyed by him watching his kung fu without headphones on. We're learning who our main character is through unusual choices. Not a lot of 13-year-olds, are going to be using a portable DVD player on a plane when there's TVs, meaning that he brought this specifically so that he could watch kung fu on the plane. And we know also that most 13-year-olds are not watching movies from the 70s in general. I know there's exceptions to that, but we're already sort of seeing a unique person, right? We are learning who this unique person is. We learn that he is polite, and although he is considered... I like this one. The audio emits from his player speakers. He's not wearing headphones. So it's clearly important to him to be polite, but not so important that he wouldn't watch his kung fu on a plane. I love that. So there's a little more to the scene. There's like another half page to it. Basically, all that happens is he shuts the DVD player. The flight attendant walks off, brings him back soda and snacks, and then our last line here is, Simon, under the immensity of this kind gesture, looks like he might cry. I love that. Very sensitive and polite kid. obsessed with kung fu is what we get from this opening page. What else do you guys notice?
Well, it looks like that we're being set up for maybe a hero who's going to use his kung fu, and maybe a Karate Kid-esque kind of movie.
Sure. Yeah, we might understand that. Okay, so if this is going to revolve around martial arts, maybe we're setting the promise that martial arts will play a big role in the story somehow. Meaning we assume our main character will try to learn them or use them, perhaps. We can look at the title as part of the promises we're making, too, right? The title is The Black Belt. So we're like, okay,
Right.
I think this will probably be about a kid trying to learn martial arts.
Right, but is there any other? What is the antagonist? Is the antagonist his own ability to learn and the struggle within that, or is he already a black belt, or even as a brown belt? There's different levels of brown belt, but well, that's actually karate. I don't know what kung fu has. Anyway, but if he's not yet a black belt, does he still maybe have to, try and take care of villains, with his martial arts before maybe he's a black belt,
These are questions we might wonder. I haven't read this. I've read all the other Randall Green scripts. I haven't read this one through yet, so I don't know the answers to these things. But these are questions that you might wonder after the first page. And that
Right.
once we have raised these questions, that's enough to keep a reader going, okay, well, maybe I'll read the next page to see what happens next or to learn more about this person.
Mm-hmm. And why hasn't this guy? He's such a great screenwriter. Why hasn't he ever had a script produced?
It's hard. It's very hard to get a movie made these days, especially comedy, where the market is getting smaller and smaller for comedy movies. Movies can fall apart at any stage of the production process. I mean, I've had 3 scripts set up in major production companies that never actually went anywhere. I've had one set up for 2 years at a production company. It's a really difficult market for screenwriting right now.
Okay. Well, my personal statement that I want to say is that there's so much junk out there, and also, Hollywood just seems to want to keep making more and more superhero movies, and even though I like them, the last thing we need is another Batman or Spider-Man movie. Please, could we just have a 5-year hiatus so we could, get,
Just
so we
reset,
could,
reset to zero.
yes, reset and actually maybe want another one, and
I
also,
agree.
we don't need to keep telling the same origin stories for Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man every single time. It's like, no, we know it. If you don't know it, watch a movie.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree. It's a more and more IP driven marketplace right now. More and more driven by properties like comic books and toys. And I have a friend who's mostly a comedy writer, and most of what he pitches on are movies based on board games and candies at this point. So that's where we are in terms of Hollywood screenwriting at the moment. We have some more questions.
Candies?
Yeah, candy.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, if you believe that. The comedy world right now is people are pitching on movies based on snacks.
Heath Bar movie.
Sorry, say that again?
The Heath Bar movie.
Oh, who knows? Yeah, why not? I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Swedish Fish movie at some point.
I'm down for a Payday movie.
At least a Swedish Fish is a character, though, right? Like, it's not
Payday
just
is
like
a concept.
it has a face on it.
It's an idea.
Right. It's a character, sort of. Here's some other comments from our chat. Lee says, the crux of the film probably won't be a huge global problem. Even if it's an action flick, the focus will be more personal. Yeah, that's a good observation, Lee. So the fact that we are so intensely focused on learning who this main character is, the interesting things about them, maybe the contradictions in them, or the flaws in them, things like that, it is telling us this is going to be about this person. This is going to be this kid's story. Nacho says, the last line is powerful. Raises a question about why he might look like he would just cry from the flight attendant just bringing him snacks. Yeah, that tells us this is a kid that people are not usually very nice to. Great comments and observations, everybody. Shall we do one more? Let's do Lock and Key. I really like this one. Okay, so this is a fantasy pilot by Joe Hill. He's a novelist, so you're going to see in this one how he perfectly melds the kind of like novelistic style with screenwriting style. He does so wonderfully. He's also one of my favorite authors, so that kind of helps. Okay, let's look at page 1 and read it out. Whoops. Let me move out of the way. Okay, so we start by fading in. Exterior, a weathered door, frozen afternoon. So he's using a little more detail than you usually even use in a slug line, but it perfectly works somehow. Here is an old splintery door in the winter light. Such a poetic first line. Like, you don't normally see very novelistic first lines like that, but it works. I know that, like, some of these things I'm saying, all these guidelines are in place, and then my favorite examples of people are sort of the ones that sidestep those guidelines. But that's the thing, is that, like, Picasso was a very, very, very talented, realistic painter before he started doing abstract stuff, so you should endeavor to do the same, is all I'll say. Let me keep going. I'll stop interrupting. Here's an old splintery door in the winter light. A knuckly hand reaches into frame, hesitates, and then knock, knock. Exterior, the well house, afternoon. So now we imagine we're kind of pulling back and showing where we are. A gawky, awkward teenager in a wool cap and a thin jacket stands before a 17th century well house. This is located on the grounds of a fabulous New England manse, that's like a mansion, known as Key House, a place which is in many ways the show's central character, but we don't see the grand house yet. So you can see this is clearly a show that was already greenlit, because normally you won't need to put these things in place that are like, we won't know this yet. But it is helpful sometimes if you're essentially writing the script for a director that's already attached to the show. The well house is a stone outbuilding with a single barred window in one side. The kid who stands uncertainly before it is Al Grubb, a not terribly bright burnout. Al says hello, and he puts his ear to the door and listens, and says, "Are you still in there?" There's nothing. He begins to straighten, and there comes a clunk from somewhere in the well house, a sound that just about causes Al Grubb to jump out of his unlaced boots. He swallows, studies the door, and begins to creep around the side of the well house to the window. He says, "I came back. I mean, obviously, I'll help you. I want to help you." On the barred window, and the impenetrable darkness behind, we hear a girl's voice just say, "You know what I want." All right, there's our first page here. The opening scene, which is, or the opening sequence is actually quite brilliant. That goes up until, I think, page 6. It's a 5 or 6 page cold open. This is a 55-page streaming show, so we have a little more time in our cold opens than we do in network, obviously. What are we doing in this first page here? So much. We begin by setting the mood and the tone, the wintry light, the frozen afternoon, and we very clearly establish where we are. A 17th century well house, a fabulous New England mansion known as Key House, a stone outbuilding, a barred window. So many details. It feels so tactile, and it feels like you are there. When he writes descriptions of places, you feel like you're really there. But we don't use too many words. That's the other thing with screenwriting, is that you have to do all this, but in a very condensed way. I used to say it's sort of like you're tweeting a novel. Like, imagine you have like 160 characters or whatever, maximum for every single line, and you have to be as clear, brief, and evocative and literary as you can within those confines, which he's just an absolute master of. So we're building out the world that we're entering. We're sort of setting the idea that this is going to be a mysterious, maybe spooky, kind of scary story. Even in these first few lines, we don't know whose knuckly hand is reaching into frame to knock on this door. And we ultimately are seeing a mystery kind of open before us. Why would this teenager be coming to an abandoned, well house, and talking to a girl inside who says, "You know what I want"? Is there someone trapped in there? Is there some kind of supernatural thing in there? We don't really know, but it is intriguing us enough to turn the page and to say, I am confident that the writer will answer these questions if I continue to read. Anything else on here that I wanted to mention? I would maybe put an age on the kid if you guys were writing this yourselves, but he tells us he's a teenager, so clearly anywhere between 14 to 19, right? The kid who stands before it is Al Grubb, a not terribly bright burnout. Not a lot of physical description of him, but we definitely do get a sense of what his behavior and demeanor is like here. Right. Anything else you guys notice here?
I have a question. How can you be a burnout as a teenager?
I don't know. Drop out of school, do drugs and drink all day, rob a convenience store. There's plenty of ways.
Yeah, that's not a burnout. That's a dropout. A burnout is somebody who's done something for usually at least 7 years or more, and, has just become emotionally unattached to what they're doing. They're tired of it, and they just feel like they can't do it anymore. Although you can become burnt out at a earlier rate if if you have certain psychological, triggers and pressures, but like maybe you have PTSD or some other illness, or you have abuse in a situation, but it's kind of hard to be a burnout as a teenager, unless maybe you are abused or you've had PTSD, then okay, but
Yeah, I'm not sure what the answer is.
I would just say, a dropout instead of a burnout, but,
Sure, that might work fine. Yeah, I'm not sure I've read these comics, but I haven't actually watched the show, so I can't really answer the question. It definitely raises some, it makes the audience question these things, though. Makes you wonder, what is this kid's deal?
There is a slang. I will say I kind of get Michelle's point, but I do think there is kind of a slang word that they do use in high school, like a burnout. Like, I would imagine a guy who's like smoking weed, like burn. I mean, I know that there. I think there is like a different context for it.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
But I know what you're saying, like burnt out, like someone who's burnt out. I totally get it, because it's like, yeah, you can't, it's hard to be burnt out on something if you're a teenager. Like, you haven't been doing anything for 7 years yet, usually. So
School.
like a burnt out.
You could easily be burnt out of school. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's true. You could be, but like a burnout. Yeah, I think there is like a slang term. So, anyways, but I get your points. Yeah,
I haven't been a teenager literally for decades, so there's so much slang that kids use. I just say, what?
Sure. Sure, understood. Nacho says this was riveting, especially the prose, stronger than the filmed pilot, in my opinion. I think Amanda watched the pilot and had the same impression. I seem to recall it open with someone burning some papers and a kid riding in a car. It does. The comic opens with this scene. This is pretty close to the comic, if I remember correctly.
And they switch the role of the brother and sister. They have this. They have the sister be a burnout and the brother to be the in the pilot. Yeah, I was like, what the heck? How did they decide to do that?
Yeah. Development notes. Development will change quite a lot. Like, you can read a whole script from the original writer, and this is the the author who wrote the source material, and they'll still change it. It doesn't matter. Like, development, they'll do whatever they want. You're asking to create, this multi-million-dollar corporation that you've created by making a show is going to be steered by many different, what do you call them? Pilots? Steered by many different. There are many different hands on the wheel. A lot of cooks in the kitchen, for sure. Okay. So thanks for listening to these breakdowns of these first pages. I think we'll move to, I'll write a first page for something, and then you guys are going to do that same exercise, and we'll save about 20 minutes towards the end. I hope to maybe look at a few first pages if you guys have any to share. I won't be able, just due to time, won't be able to do tons of feedback, but we'll at least be able to do a read-through and feedback. So just be getting that ready if you want that. In the meantime, let's do first page. I'm going to write a first page of a brand new script. And I wanted to use didn't I have it somewhere? Oh, it's saved in my other tab. One sec. So I've picked one of the recent picture prompts from our channel, or from our Discord channel. And again, if you're just joining us now, you can join us at scriptcount.net. If you want to join our Discord, you can find a link to join us there and access a bunch of our free classes and chat channels and discussion and things like that. So I'm going to write a movie based on the first page of this one. Florida woman kidnaps scientists to make her dog immortal. I just thought this was a funny headline. I didn't actually click on the real story that this went to. Who knows if this actually has some kind of tragic actual story behind it. I'm going to prefer not to look it up, just so for the purposes of this, I can write kind of a wacky opening page. But this sounds to me, this is like a sci-fi comedy, right? Sci-fi dark comedy, perhaps. She kidnaps a scientist to make her dog immortal. It's like Frankenweenie meets what's a good kidnapping drama we could use. I can't even name a kidnapping drama off the top of my head, except for one more to Taken.
Taken.
But in that, I guess you're right. That is a movie that involves kidnapping. I guess I'm thinking more a story where our main character is one of the kidnappers. Go ahead.
Isn't there one where someone takes a hospital hostage to make them treat his kid?
Is it called John Q? Is it called John Q? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There's our other comp. Frankenweenie meets
7 Psychopaths.
Oh, that involves kidnapping a dog. Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, so I'm going to write the first page of this, and I'm not going to overthink anything. I'm just going to sort of go with my first instincts on this. And let's briefly look at some of these basics of drama. So what are the essential elements of drama? This is what you might learn in a acting class or in like a theater class. We have character, objective, and tactic. So the character is, who is this scene about? And anything, you know, that makes them unique as a person. Our objective is, what are they trying to do? And the tactic is, how are they trying to do it? And sometimes the tactic will change. And often in longer scenes, the tactic will change as they encounter an obstacle that cannot be superseded with their initial tactic, and they're forced to then adjust. So, our story is woman kidnaps a scientist to make her dog immortal. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to first just note out what my, I'm going to write out my ideas for what will happen in this first page, and then we're going to execute it. So I'm just going to sort of give commentary as I go through. I'll stop for questions at the end, but I would say just like stick with me, just go with me for a moment or for a few minutes as I write this out, just so that I can get through the whole thing, and then I'll stop for questions. So first thing I'm going to do is decide what exactly is going to happen here. So this is woman's dog seems like it's on the verge of death. So we're going to say lady at home, dog is dying, kids gather around sad. Maybe they ask, is Fido going to die? And she's sort of staring down at it. Let's say, what is she, kidnap a scientist? Okay, so she's staring down at the dog. Reveal, she's got a gun in her hand. And it sort of seems like maybe we tease, is she going to shoot the dog to put it down? And that's what it seems like at first, until she's like, they ask, is Fido going to die? And she says, no. And then maybe let's cut to, she's driving. And maybe she's even like, don't be a coward. And let's maybe do the thing where, so as she's driving, we're going to continue to hear the audio of this first conversation for a little bit that will carry us over these next couple scenes, or these next couple moments. This is all the same scene. So she's driving, she's like, don't be a coward. She gets to the science lab. Is that a place? The science lab. And she holds up a scientist, and she's like, we have technology. Then let's cut to, I don't know, a workshop. Or let's actually get the scientist from the parking lot, and then we'll take him in to the lab for the next scene. So parking lot, she holds up a scientist. She says, we have technology. Then let's go into the lab, and she's going to be forcing the scientist to wire her dog up. It's just so weird. With, tubes and electricity and chemicals and basically stuff to keep him alive. And then she's like, we're not. Or maybe she's like, don't worry, Fido. You'll be back soon. And then she cocks the revolver hammer. And scientist, pushes the scientist button. Okay, let's have that be our opening page here. Something kind of like this. So it's nice to, if you just want to write out like a really brief version of what the scene would be, this is useful to do sometimes. Just a really, really kind of abbreviated, quick form of what you're about to write, just so you can envision these moments a little bit better. All right, so let's start to write it out. So we'll need a location first of all. Why does my font look like that? Okay, so interior house. Let's start it at daytime. And I think that the way we're going to do this is let's open on the dog. Actually, you know what? Let's do a sort of a slow pan, and I'm still not exactly writing how the lines will be, but this is just the feeling that we're going to have. Slow pan across. Let's say it's like a champion dog of she takes him to dog shows, and he's got a bunch of ribbons and trophies, etc. And then we're going to pan down from that and find the dog dying in his bed, breathing hard, clinging to life, that sort of thing. And then we're going to hear probably the kid's voice off screen, and then we're going to find our main character. So we're sort of like, imagine we tilt up to reveal. Let's name, what was her, she's from Florida. What's a good Floridian name? Her name's Tammy. Sounds like a name from Florida. she stares down. We reveal she's got the gun, and then we sort of make it seem like she's going to shoot the dog until she's like, not on my watch. Yeah, that sort of thing. And then we're going to cut to this couple other locations for the rest of the scene. All right, let's get writing. So, interior house day. Let's just open on a picture, a framed. Oh no, opening on photos is kind of cheating. Let's open on a trophy. A golden trophy. It would probably be gold-plated, wouldn't it? Gold-plated trophy. A tiny statue of a woman holding up a dog, cheering. And let's be a little more specific, so let's just say it's a border collie. It's like a show dog, isn't it? Okay, so, and then let's maybe say in the reflection, or maybe in the room someone is crying. And let's be a little more specific. A little girl is crying. Okay, so, and then we're going to show the dog, Fido, a 12-year-old border collie. We already said border collie. Let's just say ex-show dog. Clings to life in his, let's call it a big fluffy bed. She's probably only bought the best stuff for him. He, shakes and jitters. Eyes staring at nothing. All right, the dog's dying. And then we're going to reveal who's been crying this whole time, right? So we're going to, at his side sits Tammy, and let's say she's 46. A woman with tear-streaked makeup. And let's be a little more specific, a dog trainer with tear-streaked makeup, fidgeting with a leash, a worn leather leash. Being more specific. And then we hear one of her kids from off-screen. So we'll hear a little girl's voice, I suppose. Is Fido dying? She asks. And Tammy looks to her two children, a girl and boy. We can add more details to this later if we need to. Who kneel, red-faced, and teary-eyed by the dog's side. And then we're going to reveal the... let's build up just one more line till we reveal the gun in her hand. So she smiles sadly at them and shakes her head slowly. And Tammy says, well, actually, let's not have her shake her head until we reveal the gun. So let's have her smile sadly at them. let's build it up, actually. She'll say something like, Jenny, death is a very natural part of life. And then she, from, she should be holding the gun. We don't want to scare the kids with it, so I would think maybe it's like on her lap. A shotgun, or she loads the shotgun resting across her lap. I put the prop in all caps to show that we're kind of revealing it here. This is so absurd. So the kids, cry harder. Tammy is heartbroken as she stands, racks the gun. Is that what you call it with a shotgun? And then Fido looks up at her, pleading. He licks her ankle. Something breaks inside Tammy. We see it on her face. Something like that. Something breaks inside. I'm going to leave it as that for now. And she says, actually, no. And then let's immediately cut to our next scene. Tammy's car, driving, I'll say soon after. She drives like a maniac down the icy roads, swerving erratically. The shotgun rests in the passenger seat. And let's continue to hear her voice. Death is for cowards. Yeah, let's go with this for now. And let's take us to the parking lot. So, exterior parking lot. Let's put this a couple hours later. She's had to wait until the science people are done with their daily science. Let's say night. So,
It's raining.
it's raining, sure.
Very dramatic.
The dark exterior of a research lab. Rain. Quiet. And then a scientist named Melvin. That's a very scientist name. Let's make him a research. Or a bio researcher. I don't exactly know what that is, but let's just say that for now. Melvin. And let's just say he's a geeky bio researcher. Sure, the first thing we think of, why not? Named Melvin. He's going to be 29. Strides from the front doors after a long day of work. Oops, I'm going past my first page a little bit. And then we would probably want to do something like pull back until we recede through, or we recede into Tammy's car, where she sits in the dark, waiting. The rain shadows streak her face like tears. Alright, let's see if I can fit this all onto one page really quick. So I'm going to pull back until we recede into Tammy's car, where she waits in the dark. She lurks in the dark. Rain shadows streak her face. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to see if I can bring one line up so I can fit this all onto one page. Let me just check really quick. Oh, I really like the pacing of this moment here. No, so each of the lines, it sort of feels like it's a separate shot, right? So that's why we space things down the page, to make it feel like we're living in the rhythm of the story like this. I'm actually going to take out this line where she says, "Death is a natural part of life." Because that will allow us to... There we go. All right, great first page now. I mean, great being a very subjective term. But you guys at least maybe see how we can, like, introduce our character, set an objective in place, and we learn about the tactic they'll use to overcome it, and we sort of start to set the tone of this story. I'll just post the PDF in the chat. I know this is stupid, but any questions, just not so much on the result of this, because I know I came up with this in 3 minutes, but any questions on the process of this? Do you guys think you can now do this?
It seems kind of like maybe I could do a bad job of it. I haven't left yet, but I'm about to. I've actually got another class for something else at 3, and I've got to run in there before then. But anyway, I think maybe I could do a bad job of that.
That's okay.
You know, but I just put in the chat that I used to be in the nanotechnology industry, and there was a woman who gave about $4 million to a molecular chemist who was in the field, who I knew, and she gave him about $4 million to clone her dog, and she wanted her dog to keep living, and the molecular chemist wanted to be able to demonstrate how it will be possible to clone human beings. You know.
Interesting. Okay, so there's some basis for
the
story in reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what you're doing is sort of like Frankenstein, which I love. That's one of my favorite horror movies. So I'm not going to critique you, because I'm going to say that's awesome.
It's a little silly, but you know.
Well, no, I would kind of expect it to be a little bit of a horror comedy, which I love.
Yeah, I think it would be a horror comedy for sure.
But if you wanted it to be a little bit more like reality, I'm just adding that. If you decide to change, directions, which I would be totally interested in, because I also love sci-fi. I love most anything. But anyway, except I'm just tired of Superman, and I'm tired of superhero movies.
Sure, understood.
it's flooded. But anyway, but I just wanted to add that, and yeah, I think maybe I could do a very bad job on it and maybe improve in,
Yeah,
like 6
that's
months
okay.
or something.
That's the whole idea.
Okay. Well, I've got to get going. Y'all have a great day. Thank you for the great class.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming by.
Bye-bye.
Bye. We have some questions in the chat. One from Lee that says, which beats would you recommend knowing before tackling the first page? Would it be better to have a sense of the ending or the second act? Well, yeah, before you go to pages, you should have an intimate knowledge of every beat, and you should know, in my method at least, I mean, you can use whatever method you want, but if you're taking classes here on Script Camp and you want to use the methods that I teach and use, you know what happens on every single page before you do this. So all of it, you got to know all of it before you begin. But that's the thing, is that you want to spend at least several weeks on figuring out all of these things and outlining it really extensively so that you can have a very detailed plan for what's going to happen on every page. Oh, in this rapid fire instance, Lee is asking? None. I mean, none, basically. I guess we're just in intro right now. I mean, intro is the first beat, and so for just the first page, it might be sort of something that feels a little bit like a catalyst just for the purposes of this exercise. Like, I may not have made this the opening scene if this was going to be an actual feature. This feels more like a short film where we're like getting to the point right away. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. For just an opening page like this, you don't really need to know any beats. We're just trying to figure out how to communicate visual information on the page in the most efficient way. Thanks, Lee. Nacho says we have questions from Twitch. How do I find that? Is that in the Stream People channel?
Yes.
It is. Why can I never just scroll to find that?
I moved it close to this channel, so
you did?
It's easier to find.
Thank you. Okay. That's like when you're like, I'm going to remember where my keys are because I'm going to put them in just the right spot. Then you do that and you can't find them then. Can you link to it? I just cannot identify it. Where on earth is it? Thank you. Okay, so questions from Twitch, from Macaroon Granola. Hi, Macaroon Granola. That sounds delicious. A shotgun in the seat, not in a gun rack. Oh, you're referring to... This was in reference to the previous scene we just did with the dog lady. He says, not a mistake that's a real hillbilly woman would make. Trying to shoot a dog inside the house instead of the barn is a rookie mistake. Guts and blood everywhere is a cleaning nightmare that no mother is going to make. Agreed. Yeah, I think that's why we have her not shoot the dog in the house. She's just sort of thinking about it. And then when she's gonna go and instead use that gun to kidnap the science man. But thank you for these are good points, good comments here. Let's any other questions before we're going to move on to this next part where you guys are going to write the first page of something? Any questions before we do that? Nacho, do we have the link to the Arc Studio Pro trials if people need screenwriting software to use? Here's a big list of screenwriting software in the chat now. If you can use these. At the very top, if you click Arc Studio Pro, this comes with no watermarks, unlimited free scripts during the trial, and you can keep them after the trial. So we really recommend trying out that one. If anyone needs screenwriting software, just click one of these links in our chat. I think these are pretty much in descending order of our recommendations. So at the top is the ones we most recommend, and then it goes down from there. Okay, if you guys are all ready and there's no other questions, let's pick a new prompt for you guys to write the first page of. You're just going to do exactly what I did. Don't think too much. Don't worry about if it's good or not. This is just to establish the basics of how we, convey visual information and introduce a character and a situation on the page. Let's check our picture prompt channel, and I'll find a new one for us. Okay, we've got scammers are scamming scammers out of millions of dollars. I like that one, but maybe a little too maybe that would lead to too complicated of an opening scene. Let's try to pick something easier. Oh, I like this one. Zoo separates 5 parrots after the birds were caught, encouraging each other to swear at guests. So we're going to do a Rude Bird movie. It's called The Rude Bird. And it doesn't have to be called The Rude Bird, but for some reason that sounds like an Australian movie to me. The Rude Bird. You're a very rude bird, aren't you? Maybe it's because I used to follow a channel on YouTube where somebody always would post videos of their rude bird and they were Australian. Okay, so here's your prompt. and you'll have about 10-15 minutes to write this opening page. Zoo separates 5 parrots after they were caught swearing at the guests. So you can do whatever you want with that. It can be any genre. You can do talking animals like an animated movie if you want. It doesn't have to be. Just try to remember all these things that we have talked about today. Just establish a main character, give them something they're trying to do, maybe something in the way. You don't have to like wrap up the scene super conclusively. It doesn't have to be like an amazing opening, but just try to get the first page down. We're just trying to communicate visual information and story information as best we can. So, everyone really does no questions at all on this before we give you some time? Maybe not.
Just one page, right?
Just one page. Lee says, can I put up the character objective tactic slide again? Yeah, there wasn't much to it. I mean, I'll just write it out here in the chat for you if you want. So we have character. Who is this about? We have objective. What are they trying to accomplish? And then we have tactic. How specifically will they attempt to do it? That's kind of the basics. There's not much more to it than that. These are just things you should have a sense of. Okay, so I'll leave this up, and I'll leave a little note if anyone tunes into our stream that says we'll be coming back at 12:50. Get as much done as you can. I think we will not end up having time to review first pages at this rate of student scripts that they have brought to the class, but we have plenty of feedback channels and ways for you to get that feedback on Script Camp. Let's, I'd rather spend the time on this here, so we'll say returning at 12:50 PST. Okay, well, if you guys got everything you need, then I say go for it. Let me know if you have any questions in the meantime. I will be on mute until we return in 10 minutes. So let's get ready to share what you have in PDF format, which you can post in our classroom channel. Even if it's not finished, that's okay. We'll just go with whatever you have. Who's ready to share?
Give me a sec. Exporting.
Mm-hmm. So we'll take a look at as many of these as we can. We do only have a short time, but I'll at least be able to give it a read through, give you some comments. I think we finally just reached 100 members on WordCamp, which is now our second biggest server in the Skill Camp server family. So if you guys are into novels, prose, short fiction, nonfiction, anything like that, check out WordCamp. I'll link to it in the chat. Okay, as soon as somebody's ready to post, then we'll take a look. Did anyone have any questions or difficulties with this? Does anyone need help exporting or is not sure where to post?
Got it. This is the most I could come up with in the time. I was just...
That's okay.
I got a bit sidetracked.
Yeah, no problem. We'll take a look. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like we'll just have time to do Marcus's, probably. All right. And as a reminder, if you're just joining us at the very end of the class for some reason, the prompt was, zoo separates 5 parrots after they were caught encouraging each other to swear at guests. So we're doing a movie about very rude birds. Okay, let's take a look. A fist slams directly into a slick wood conference table. Ooh, nice image to begin with. Interior zoo meeting room. So we're pulling back a little bit to reveal we're in some kind of conference room in the facility of the zoo. Gabby, 36, a wide, sturdy woman with a thick Minnesotan accent, leads a packed room of caretakers, summer interns, and uninterested shopkeepers. Nice. So when you say she leads the room, I think you mean she leads a meeting in the room of these people, or maybe something like that. Okay. She says, we have to do something about these damn birds. That's when Ryan, 32, a short? Wait, what? Short.
Yeah, my bad.
Oh, a short wearing. Okay, I see. So I think we need a hyphen there. He's wearing a short wearing man-child with the width of a Slim Jim. Hops right next to her. Nice, funny descriptions. Good work. What Gabby means to say is, and she interrupts and says, we need to do something about the damn birds, and the staff nod in disagreement. The shopkeep says, I caught the red one saying the C word. Ryan says, okay, well, somebody must have taught them that one. The shopkeep says, they're parrots, not cocks. Offensive it is. The staff nod and murmur in agreement. Nice, okay. So I think the shopkeeper here means not, like, roosters. Is that the joke there?
Yeah, that's the
Okay. Well done. So nice work with this. I like how you have so when you're introducing crowds, for instance, or large groups of characters, I love how you said a room of packed caretakers, interns, and uninterested shopkeepers, and then as they emerge into the spotlight, one by one, you introduce them, which is, you're doing it the exact right way. When we have other characters, like, for instance, it says shopkeep, we might need a little bit of something for them. Just say something like, the greasy-haired shopkeep raises his hand, or something like that. It doesn't need to be, if it's just a character for a few lines, we don't need, like, a really full description of them, but just anything. Just, like, even a couple words. Yeah, just a little one. I like how we set up the objective right away. I mean, it's very clear what the objective here is. We have to do something about the birds. We get a sense of how bad the problem is. They're saying the C word, so obviously we don't want the birds doing that. And I think we get a sense of who the main character... It probably seems like the main character is, or perhaps the villain of the movie is Gabby. So I think that she's going to be the one trying to stop these birds from their spree of rudeness. And
the Nurse Hatchet, if you will.
Sure. This is sort of like, what's it called? The Chicken Run, kind of like, what's her name? The Pie Lady from Chicken Run.
The Pie Lady? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good movie.
Yeah, pretty good.
So nice work with this. I know I didn't get all the way to the end of the page, but we pretty much get what's going on here. Did this everything feel okay here with you? Did you have any questions about this or anything that you struggled with here?
Oh yeah, I guess it kind of more or less continuing to type or kind of trying to figure it out, like just making it up as you go along, pretty much.
Yeah, it's a silly.
It's silly, like just,
a silly game.
Yeah, pretty much.
But that's okay. Like it's not the most intuitive way to write, to just be figuring things out as you go and making these choices as you go. Normally, we are going to have to plan extensively what the opening scene is and what the different moving parts of this are going to be. But you've done a fine job just, presenting the visuals here. I wasn't lost or confused on anything, which actually is, significant. It's very easy to confuse or lose the reader on the first page. I did not feel that here. I got a sense of the characters. Generally, nice work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus. Anyone else want to share in our last couple minutes? Here we go. Willow has one.
Trying to get the upload to work.
Let's take a quick look at this one here. So, and I'm not going to be able to ask a lot of questions or anything just because we're down to our last few minutes, but I'll just give this a read through and we'll give this some comments. So we start exterior zoo monkey exhibit. It's an island surrounded by a moat. Monkeys lounge in the trees. Great. A school class oohs and ahs. Amongst them, Jimmy and Marlo laugh and jump, making goofy monkey sounds. I don't think we need to have monkey in quotes. They're just monkey sounds. Meanwhile, Monkey Island, just another day of being watched by the humans. Oh, are you moving us inside the exhibit at this point? If we're doing that, then I think that you would need to say interior monkey exhibit continuous, just so that we know this is the same place. We've just kind of like moved beyond the glass or beyond the bars of the exhibit or whatever it is. Just another day being watched by the humans. Redburn, a red-tailed monkey with a missing ear, reclines on a tree branch. He notices the two children's gestures. Okay, so yeah, when we move inside, I would tell us that we're going into it, or maybe even the camera. We could even have the camera, move through into the exhibit, something like that. I would probably start on Redburn, the monkey, and then at the end of the block where you introduce him, then say just another day of being watched by the humans, so we understand that what we're looking at and who we're now kind of moving our attention to following. He notices the two children's gestures. He calls out to Shorttail, who's swinging on ropes. He says, "That's 6, 3 more today and I win the bet." Shorttail pauses to watch the boys. Shorttail thinks it doesn't count. Their wrists are facing the wrong way. Redburn says, "An imitation is an imitation and it counts." They scream at each other. Okay, so they just like shriek monkey sounds at each other, I imagine. Jimmy and Marlo laugh, goofily imitating the screaming monkeys. Okay, I like this. I like the sort of division between the human world and the animal world, where they're speaking like animal language, basically, is how it kind of works in these. It felt very distinct when we're moving from both of these from one of these environments to the next. I think that he's 6, 3 more today and I win the bet. What was he counting? Number of people that make fun of them? Is that right? Or what did he mean exactly when he says 3 more today and I win? Yes, okay, so 3 more people that just taunt or belittle the monkeys. I see. Cool. So yeah, maybe this would be a story where the monkeys team up with the birds to get revenge or something like that. Nice work with this. I think that I would, and when you say a school class, I might just be a tiny bit more specific, say something like a middle school class or a high school class. This seems like maybe 4th or 5th grade to me. Or sometimes when they do a school trip, it's like several different grades that they bring, so there might be, teenagers and older kids with the younger kids too. The wrists are facing the wrong way. I wasn't 100% sure what that meant. It only counts if their wrists are facing a certain direction. I'm just, that part did confuse me a little bit. I'm not quite sure what that was referring to, but the rest of this I think I do pretty much understand. And Jimmy and Marlo, yeah, they can't understand the monkeys talking, so at the end they're just like, these guys are dumb monkeys. We're setting up the idea that they're more than just dumb monkeys, and I think that this is a nice intro. Good work with this. Thanks, Willow. And Dan has posted one too. Again, I won't be able to give too much feedback, but let's just take a look because we're just over time. Let's take a look at Chatter Squawks. Thank you again for everyone who participated in this exercise, in this class. I hope this was useful for you in just learning and trying to focus in on what's important on an opening page. All right, let's look at the first page of Chatter Squawks. Exterior Zoo Grounds Day. Animals squawks. So there's a typo there. Animals. Is there supposed to be an apostrophe here? Animals squawks, roars, and screeches blend together with human chatter. Okay, I would just say animal squawks, personally. The entrance, inviting. Children skip about, excited. And then parrots, 5 of them. Great manners on these birds, okay? And then they're swearing at the kids and using words I'm not going to say so we don't get demonetized or whatever off of YouTube. But the parrots are swearing and calling these kids awful words. This one's about to say a way worse word until... A slammed fist. I'm not sure what a slammed fist means here. Whose fist is slamming into what?
That was supposed to be a pre-lap. I don't know. I guess I forgot to write pre-lap.
Oh, okay. It's just the sound that we hear. I see. So yeah, pre-lap sound into the security room, and the security guard, Marla, snarls. Other security guards and caretakers avoid her gaze. That's a little bit like the other scene we had here with this sort of meeting. She says, "Where did these birds learn this language? Did one of you take them to the ghetto?" Still no eye contact. I like that. One brave soul, a caretaker, meekly, Irina 27. Okay, one brave soul, Irina 27, meekly speaks up. We should put just the name a little earlier. She says, "I can't believe you got this job." Maria smacks her fist and says, "What was that you were..." Whoa, goodness gracious, some terrible language in this one. Irina is indeed Hispanic, still rude. Yeah, no kidding, that's rude. And she says, nothing. Okay, now fix this. All right, I think we're learning where these birds learned all these nasty words. I think that's the joke here, right? So she says, "Where the F did these effing blah blah learn all this language?" I think the joke here is that Maria is responsible for this. Is that right?
Or it could be a twist later on that she wasn't actually responsible.
Oh, that would be a big twist, yeah, considering how much this lady swears. Okay, so nice job with this. Just watch for if we don't say it's pre-lap, we're not going to quite know what that something like this means. With the...
To be fair, I didn't realize I was making this. It was kind of like rush, get this in there, get this out there, because there's 10 minutes or whatever.
Sure, understandable. When you are, another thing is that when you're sort of like introducing stuff to us, especially in the first couple lines, then within the same block, you might want to space these things out a little bit more. So it's like the entrance, inviting. Children skip about. And then parrots, that would probably be a next line down. So we'd probably want to space that down and say and then off to the right, like this is a separate shot. Or I would space this down the page a bit more. 5 of them, great manners on the birds. Why do we say great manners are you being sarcastic in the action line?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotta have voice.
Right. But I would put it after they talk, not before they talk. Because if you put it before, then we're just going to be like, what do you mean exactly? How do we see that they have great manners? And now they're swearing. This doesn't seem like you're describing them. So just if it's before, if it's after, then we'd get it. You're remarking upon they have bad manners, in fact. I think it would just come across a little clearer that way. All right, nice work with this. Thanks for submitting, everybody. We'll have more of these coming up, like our Christmas Pitch Fest coming up on the 21st. That's this Wednesday, 6 o'clock. We have plenty of other things coming up soon. We have a fantasy club group today at 5 o'clock, run by Amanda. We have a script swap at 2 o'clock, table read at 2 o'clock. That's just our regular Sunday stuff. Nacho, anything else we want to leave people with today?
Yeah, just come back join us on Wednesday for the Christmas script swap. We have a few more free classes in the next few weeks.
Yeah, let me leave that up here. Let me just open the floor for questions to anything we talked about or worked on today. All right, if there's no more questions, we will wrap up for now. Hope to see you guys soon at your next script camp class or event. Remember, new boot camps are starting in the new year. Pilot boot camp resumes January 6th, and feature boot camp begins week 1, January 8th. You'll write a whole feature in 8 weeks.
And table read starts in about 1 hour.
Thank you, Nacho, and thanks everyone here. We hope to see you soon at your next script camp class, workshop, or event. Hope you have a great rest of your Sunday.